Hong Kong, March 1968. Inside a converted warehouse in Kowloon, 28 martial artists stand in complete silence, watching a young instructor demonstrate a principle most of them have never seen before: efficiency. No wasted motion, no unnecessary technique, just the shortest path between intention and impact. The man teaching is 27 years old. His name is Bruce Lee, and for the past few months, word has been spreading through Hong Kong's tightly connected martial arts community that this young instructor is teaching something dangerous. Not dangerous because it hurts people, dangerous because it challenges 300 years of tradition. Some say he has abandoned classical kung fu, others say he has simplified it. A few claim he has improved it. But not everyone is willing to accept that idea, which is why, on this particular morning, the door to the training hall opens and a man walks inside who has spent 26 years mastering Wing Chun. His name is Sifu Wang Kwai. I am 43 years old, owner of a respected martial arts school in Mong Kok. More than 60 students are training under his instruction, and a reputation that reaches nearly every serious practitioner in Hong Kong. He doesn't sit down. He doesn't introduce himself politely. He walks straight onto the training floor. Bruce Lee stops the demonstration. The students step back slightly. Wang studies the room, first the equipment, the students, the quiet attention filling the hall before finally looking directly at Bruce Lee. Then he speaks. I've been hearing things about this school. His voice is calm, measured, but I came here to find out if they're true. The room is silent. Wang takes one more step forward. I want to know whether what you teach actually works. Another pause. Against someone who has spent 26 years doing this seriously. And suddenly the demonstration is over. Because this is no longer a lesson. It's a challenge. Hong Kong's martial arts community in 1968 was far smaller than outsiders imagined. From the outside, it looked vast, dozens of schools scattered across Kowloon and Hong Kong Island, each carrying a different lineage, each claiming roots that stretched back centuries. But the truth was simpler. The instructors knew each other. They spoke of each other in quiet conversations after training sessions and during tea in small shops near their schools. Reputations traveled quickly. So did rumors. When a young instructor began attracting attention, people noticed. Over the previous year, a particular rumor had been circulating through those conversations. It was about a young man named Bruce Lee who had returned to Hong Kong with ideas that sounded unusual to many traditional practitioners. He spoke openly about principles instead of styles. He questioned techniques that had been practiced for generations. And most unusually, he encouraged students from different martial backgrounds to train together in the same room. Some instructors dismissed it immediately. Others became curious. A smaller number began to hear something else from the students who had visited the school and returned to their own training halls afterward. They said the young instructor was fast, not the kind of speed created by rehearsed demonstrations or choreographed drills. Real speed, the kind that only appeared when two people actually tried to touch each other. Among the men who heard those stories was a Wing Chun instructor named Sifu Wang Kwai. Wang Kwai was 43 years old in the spring of 1968. He had begun studying Wing Chun when he was 17 and had practiced it every day since. 26 years of repetition had given his movements the calm efficiency that only comes from long familiarity. Nothing in his technique was rushed. Nothing was wasted. For the last 14 years, he had run his own school in the Mong Kok district of Kowloon. The school occupied the second floor of a narrow commercial building above a herbal medicine shop. It was not large, but it was respected. Around 60 students trained there regularly, ranging from young men who had just begun learning the fundamentals to senior students who had been with Wang for nearly a decade. Within the martial arts circles of Kowloon, Wang Kwai's reputation was straightforward. He was known as a serious practitioner, not a performer, not a promoter, a teacher who had spent most of his adult life doing the same thing every morning before the city was fully awake, practicing the same forms, refining the same structures, repeating the same principles until they existed in his body without conscious thought. Men like that did not chase rumors, but they did investigate them. Over several months, Wang had heard the same story repeated by different students who had visited Bruce Lee's school out of curiosity. They described techniques that did not quite resemble anything taught in traditional classes, movements that interrupted attacks instead of meeting them directly, footwork that seemed to arrive where an opponent was about to be rather than where he currently stood. Most instructors would have ignored the reports. Wang did not. Not because he believed them, because he doubted them. 26 years of training creates a particular kind of certainty. A practitioner begins to trust that the structure he has refined through thousands of hours of practice is fundamentally sound. When someone claims to have discovered something better, the claim demands examination. So on a Tuesday morning in March 1968, Wang Kuai closed his school for the morning session. He put on his black training jacket and asked two of his senior students to accompany him. Together they crossed Kowloon and walked into the converted warehouse where Bruce Lee was teaching. Inside the room, 28 students were already standing along the training floor. When the door opened and Wang stepped inside, the conversation in the room disappeared almost instantly. Several of the students recognized him. In Hong Kong's martial arts community, names traveled quickly. And Sifu Wang Kuai was not the sort of man who visited another instructor's school without a reason. For a moment after Sifu Wang Kuai finished speaking, the room held a silence that felt deliberate rather than accidental. 28 students stood along the edges of the training floor, aware that something unusual had just entered their Tuesday morning lesson. In most schools across Hong Kong, a moment like this followed a predictable pattern. A visiting instructor would be welcomed with formal politeness. Tea might be offered. Words would be chosen carefully because reputation moved quickly through the small network of practitioners who trained across the city. What Wang had done was different. He had not arrived as a guest. He had arrived as a test. At the center of the floor, Bruce Lee stood quietly, his attention fixed on the man in front of him. There was no visible irritation in his expression, and no particular urgency either. He appeared to be studying the situation the way a craftsman studies a tool before deciding how to use it. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he nodded once. All right. The answer was delivered without emphasis. No conditions. No negotiation. Just a simple acceptance that moved the room one step closer to something that could not easily be undone. Bruce turned slightly toward the students standing nearby. Everyone to the walls, he said. The instruction was calm but immediate. The 28 students moved quickly and without discussion, stepping back from the center of the training floor and forming a loose perimeter around the worn wooden boards. Some leaned against the walls beside the heavy bags and wooden dummies. Others remained standing with their arms folded, eyes fixed on the two men who now occupied the middle of the room. David Chen, who had been part of the earlier demonstration, stepped quietly toward the east wall and joined the others. Near the doorway, Wang's two senior students remained exactly where they had first stopped. Their posture suggested confidence, but their attention had sharpened in the subtle way that happens when a situation begins to unfold faster than expected. The room was now completely silent. Outside the warehouse windows, Kowloon continued its usual rhythm of traffic and voices, but inside the school the air had settled into the stillness that precedes physical movement. Wang Kuai stepped forward onto the center of the floor. His transition into stance happened almost automatically. 26 years of practice had reduced the movement to something close to instinct. His feet aligned into the narrow triangular base familiar to every Wing Chun practitioner. Knees slightly bent, weight balanced evenly. Hands raised along the center line in the guarded position designed to protect the most direct path between opponent and target. It was not a dramatic posture. It was a practical one. Anyone familiar with the system would have recognized it immediately as the stance of someone who had practiced it thousands of times. Across from him, Bruce Lee did not mirror the structure. He remained standing in a relaxed posture that, to an outside observer, might have looked almost casual. His weight rested evenly between both feet, shoulders loose, hands lowered slightly at his sides. There was no formal guard, no exaggerated preparation. To Wang, the difference was unmistakable, a traditional structure facing something that appeared almost undefined. In many schools, that contrast alone might have suggested inexperience, but Wang was too seasoned a practitioner to rely entirely on appearances. His eyes moved carefully across Bruce's shoulders, hips, and feet, reading small signals the way experienced fighters always do. Nothing obvious revealed itself. No tension, no visible hesitation. Only the quiet readiness of someone waiting for the first movement to reveal the rest of the conversation. Wang exhaled once, steadying his breath. Around the room, 28 students watched without speaking. In a moment, the first strike would begin. And with it, the answer to the question Wang had brought with him across Kowloon that morning. Wang Kuai moved first. It was not hesitation that held him for those first few seconds, but calculation. A man who had spent 26 years refining a system did not rush blindly into an exchange. He watched the alignment of Bruce Lee's shoulders, the balance of his stance. the small shifts of weight that sometimes revealed intention before the body fully committed. For a moment nothing happened. Then Wong stepped forward. The opening technique was one he had practiced more times than he could possibly count. Wing Chun's chain punch, a rapid sequence of straight strikes delivered along the center line, each punch feeding the next in a continuous forward pressure that compressed distance and forced the opponent into retreat. It was not designed as a single decisive blow. It was designed to overwhelm. His first punch traveled directly toward Bruce Lee's center with the compact efficiency that defined the system. The second and third followed immediately behind it, the rhythm of the movement supported by years of repetition that had turned the motion into something close to automatic. Against most opponents, the sequence worked quickly. The first strike created contact, the next two created advantage, but before the first punch arrived, Bruce Lee moved. The movement was small, 4 inches at most. Instead of retreating straight back, he stepped laterally to the outside of Wong's attacking line, shifting his body just far enough that the centerline punches passed through empty space. The step happened at the exact moment Wong's weight committed forward. Not early, not late, precisely when the attack had already begun to travel. At the same instant, Bruce's right hand touched Wong's forearm. Not a block in the traditional sense, there was no opposing force. Instead, the contact redirected the punch slightly off its path, allowing Wong's own forward motion to carry the strike harmlessly past its intended target. The entire exchange lasted less than half a second. In the remaining fraction of that moment, Bruce's left hand moved. The strike was straight and economical, traveling along the shortest possible line between the two men. His knuckles connected lightly with the edge of Wong's jaw, not with full power, just enough contact to make the point unmistakably clear. Wong felt it immediately, so did everyone watching. His head shifted a few inches with the touch, and instinctively he stepped back to reset his stance. For the first time since entering the room, his expression changed, not dramatically. But the certainty that had accompanied his first attack had been replaced with something quieter: recognition. He had been hit, cleanly, and faster than he had expected. Around the room, the students remained silent, absorbing what they had just seen. Wong inhaled slowly and settled back into his stance. The first exchange had delivered information, and an experienced practitioner always used information quickly. The chain punch sequence had been anticipated and redirected. That meant the next attack required a different entry, something that forced a different response. He stepped forward again. This time his lead hand shifted into a trapping motion designed to control Bruce's arm before the strike arrived. The adjustment was subtle but meaningful, a variation intended to interrupt the timing that had defeated his first attempt. Bruce Lee did not remain in place long enough for the trap to form. His movement changed again. Another quick angle, slightly deeper this time, placing him just outside Wong's forward structure. Before Wong could adjust his footing, Bruce's shin snapped lightly into the side of Wong's lead knee. The kick carried enough force to disrupt balance without causing injury. At the same moment, Bruce's hand rose toward Wong's throat and stopped 2 inches short. The meaning of the technique required no explanation. Wong froze. For the second time in less than 30 seconds, the exchange had ended with him exposed. For several seconds after the second exchange, Sifu Wong Kwai remained still, not frozen, thinking. Experienced practitioners rarely rushed immediately after a failed technique. They paused just long enough to process what had happened and decide whether the next movement would repeat the same mistake or correct it. Wong inhaled slowly through his nose and reset his stance. Across from him, Bruce Lee waited in the same relaxed posture, his attention steady, his breathing unchanged. There was no visible preparation, no tightening of the shoulders or shifting of the feet that might announce the next movement. Only patience. Wong stepped forward again. The third exchange began with a sharper entry. Instead of closing distance directly, he angled slightly to the side, attempting to collapse the space between Bruce's shoulders and drive his attack across the center line from a different direction. His lead hand cut inward, seeking control of Bruce's arm before the strike could be interrupted. The adjustment was intelligent. It forced a different reaction, but Bruce Lee had already begun moving. His foot slid half a step backward and outward at the same time, creating a narrow lane between Wong's attacking arm and the space where his body had been a moment earlier. The motion was so small it almost looked like an accident of balance. Then Bruce's hand appeared beneath Wong's forearm. The contact lifted slightly, turning the attack away from its intended line just long enough for Bruce's other hand to rise toward Wong's jaw. He stopped at 1 inch short. Wong recognized the position immediately and stepped back. The fourth exchange happened faster. This time Wong committed with more force, driving forward with a low stance designed to crowd Bruce's movement and prevent the lateral escape that had disrupted the earlier attacks. For the first time in the encounter, Bruce Lee did not strike first, allowed the forward pressure to continue for one step. Then his foot hooked behind Wong's ankle. The sweep was subtle. There was no dramatic motion, only a brief shift of weight and a turning of the hips that removed the stability from Wong's stance. Wong caught himself before fully falling, but the imbalance forced him to retreat 2 steps to regain his footing. The students along the walls remained silent. By now they understood that the exchanges were not random. Each one was revealing something new. Wong returned again. The fifth exchange lasted barely a second. His attack came faster now, an attempt to overwhelm the rhythm that had repeatedly slipped away from him. Bruce Lee moved with equal speed, angling around Wong's shoulder instead of directly away from him. In a single motion, he stepped behind Wong's center line. From that position, several finishing techniques were available. Wong felt it instantly and stopped. For the first time since entering the room, he hesitated. Only one attempt remained. The sixth exchange began with complete commitment. Wong launched forward with the strongest technique in his arsenal, the one he had used countless times in both teaching and sparring. His weight drove into the strike with the full confidence of 26 years of repetition. This time Bruce Lee did not step away. He stepped with the attack. As Wong's momentum carried him forward, Bruce turned slightly, guiding the force past its intended path instead of resisting it. His arm redirected the pressure while his hips rotated underneath the movement. The shift lasted less than a second. Wong's balance vanished. His feet lifted from the wooden floor and his body rotated through the air before landing flat on his back against the worn training boards. The sound of the impact echoed briefly through the quiet room, and just like that, the fight was over. For a long moment after the final throw, Sifu Wong Kwai lay on the floor, not defeated, not unconscious, fully aware. His eyes traced the ceiling above the converted warehouse, absorbing the stillness that had fallen over the room. The wooden boards beneath him seemed suddenly more real, more precise, and somehow more instructive than any training session he had conducted in the last 26 years. Then, deliberately, he placed both hands flat on the floor and lowered his forehead to rest upon them. The gesture was formal, complete, unambiguous. The bow spoke a language older than words. Acknowledgement, respect, and the admission of a lesson learned in real time. 3 seconds. The room held its breath. 28 students remained frozen, their collective gaze fixed on the two masters. Bruce Lee stepped closer, extending his right hand, palm open, not to lift Wong but as a gesture of recognition. "Get up," he said. The tone carried no triumph, only quiet acknowledgement. "You adapted. That matters more than style." Wong accepted the hand and rose. The bow complete, he straightened his black uniform, the posture of a man who understood that what had changed was not his skill but his perspective. Around the walls, students absorbed the weight of the exchange. What they had witnessed was beyond technique. It was the manifestation of principle applied in motion, adaptability in real time, and the humility that accompanies true mastery. Bruce Lee then walked Wong through the 6 exchanges in slow motion. Each motion was explained. Why the interception worked, why the interception worked, why the angle mattered, why each reaction had been selected for that precise moment. For 40 minutes, Wong listened. He asked questions with precision and curiosity, probing for the subtleties that connected principle to execution. His senior students leaned forward from the doorway to the wall, watching their teacher transform before their eyes. By the end of the session, Wong asked formally, in the full phrasing appropriate to a traditional student-teacher relationship, whether Bruce would accept him as a student. Not a casual student, but a disciple willing to commit time, ego, and the willingness to begin anew at the age of 43. Bruce agreed with one condition. Wong would continue teaching his own students, but what he learned here he would bring back to them. The transmission of principle, applied correctly, required capable intermediaries, and Wong, with 60 students and 26 years of solid foundation, was exactly that practitioner. For 8 months, Wong trained consistently on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. He asked more precise questions than any other student, integrating Bruce's principles into the fabric of his own Wing Chun practice. Observers noted subtle changes in his teaching, patience with inquiries, a deeper explanation of why rather than just how, and an expanded willingness to reconsider assumptions. On the last morning before the schedule changed, Wong presented Bruce with a small traditional gift of final acknowledgement of respect and gratitude. Bruce accepted it with equal formality. They bowed, the ritual reflecting the mutual recognition of genuine practitioners who had encountered each other fully and honestly. What had begun as a challenge ended not in victory or defeat, but in transformation. 26 years of Wing Chun met a principle-driven system and emerged stronger, broader, and more adaptable. Bruce Lee left with a disciple who would transmit the knowledge further, and Wang left with insight into the boundaries of his own understanding. The warehouse returned to silence. Hong Kong continued its rhythm outside, and inside, a quiet legacy had been forged.